drop it or drop a message on the chat box as to what you're reading right now. We like to know what sort of book are you following. Interestingly, a lot of them are reading self-help books right now. That's what I have heard from a lot of people, but we'd love to hear from you, the attendees of today's session. Interestingly, our guest is going to cover up a very interesting side of reading online. And if there are any guests who are already here who are reading online, can I see you can probably do a wave or raise your hand on the chat box. That's how convenient it is for you to start conversation. Okay, so amongst the 15 attendees, or now we are increasing. Waiting to hear from you. We have about 19 participants in attendance today for today's discussion. Just like to know what kind of book you're reading at the moment. Reaching Your Potential by Norman Vincent. Excellent. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I wonder what we're going to do now in terms of buying books in the future. How is that going to be? And it'll be interesting that online reading is going to be a completely different. Tanya says Charles Dickens, Great Expectations. Dilshan, thank you very much. And then we have another guest, Think and Grow, Teach by Napoleon Hill. Rich, that is, yes. Lead or Bleed. Thank you to our guests for joining us. It's interesting. We just have about 24 participants, so we'll wait for a couple of more minutes and then we'll kick off the session for today on Why I Read. Thank you, and certainly hope you're keeping safe. We also want to encourage our readers who are joining us here that we're going to have an interesting session, slightly different from some of the guests that we have interviewed already. But it's going to be fun, it's going to be exciting, and trust that your Saturday will be empowered, influenced. An awesome session is what we promise to give you. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I have read that book too, Greatness Guide by Robin Sharma. Interesting how a lot of positive thinking workshops are conducted in these few weeks and over the past few days. We're waiting for a few more people, few more attendees. 6:32 on the clock. And I believe we can start our session shortly. You Can Win by Shiv Khera. Thank you to all our attendees so far for being with us here today for our Why I Read segment. Okay, time's up. I think it's good to start, and that's how we are going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Pick a Book. Welcome to Why I Read segment. If you're streaming us through Facebook, here overseas, wherever you are, we certainly hope you're staying safe. And if there are bad, steady signals, don't worry, the session is recorded so you can watch it later. Why I read? We read because it's good. It helps us. It creates that influential, iconic experience of learning new inputs and also getting to know the discoveries of different elements. And on Why I Read, we cover different personalities on their lifestyle, their routine, what they do, how they kind of perceive their career, how reading kind of supported them, and how reading is a part of their day-to-day life. It doesn't have to necessarily be by reading a book. It can be the research content as well, but we're slowly deviating on the type of reading that we are evolving in today's generation. Now, our guest today is quite interesting because he's into online reading, and I thought I'd bring a little research. We know that based on a research that was there on Google, 72% of the adults read a book in some format over the year, and 65% of the respondents claim that they read a book in the last 12 months, that is. 37% of them claim that they only read printed paperback books, and 28% read print books or ebooks. 7% say that they only read ebooks. Now, we'd like to know from our audience here today, are you the paperback person who likes to read, or are you an online book reading personality. We'd like to know from our audience for today. We see that there are 35 participants. Just drop in and say, I want paperback or I want online. That's how simple it is. And we'd like to know what's your favorite style. And we see a lot of Sri Lankans are getting into the transition of online reading. I prefer hard copies. Guess one says paperback, always offline, printed. And thank you to all of you for dropping in your comments. And ladies and gentlemen, interestingly today, we have a true innovator and idea generator who is passionate about photography and videography, who spends a lot of time on research and online reading. He currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of STB Bank, who possesses over 32 years of experience in banking and technology industries. Prior to STB Bank, he was at Nations Trust Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, and John Keel's Holdings in senior management roles. He has spent a major part in banking career in Singapore, UAE, UK, and Sri Lanka, and his professional experience span across strategy, banking operations, digital transformation, technology operational risk, and client service. He's also a digital evangelist. And when I say that, he has really done his research in terms of how do we step or go ahead. So that's why I said this session is going to be quite interesting, and was widely credited for launching FreeMe, the first digital bank in Sri Lanka, and an open banking APIs when he served as the Chief Operating Officer at Nations Trust Bank. He launched UPay, Sri Lanka's payment platform, recently by SDB Bank in 2019, and Central Bank of Sri Lanka recently appointed him as the chairman of the working group of financial institutions to coordinate implementation of Lanka QR across Sri Lanka. At SCB, he spearheaded setting up operations in Afghanistan, Iran for SCB, and he played a leadership role in centralization initiatives when SCB moved operations to hubs in Chennai and Kuala Lumpur. And on M&A front, he was responsible for managing key deliverables from Greenlace Bank acquisition by SEB in Sri Lanka as a part of a global acquisition. He was also a board member of the Lanka Financial Service Bureau and governing council member of the National Institute of Business Management. He's an engineer turned banker and holds a master's degree in business administration, and he attended the management development programs at INSEAD in France and the London Business School in the United Kingdom. He loves his travel photography, videography, and he loves outdoor activities like hiking, running, and golfing, etc. Very honored to have with us the CEO of SDB Bank, Mr. Thilak Piyadigama. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. That was a quite long description and an intro, and thank you very much for that as well.
I know. People have to know about you, and that's why it's important that we read all these profiles. So how is the lockdown experience for you based on a Saturday? How is it?
Well, I think it did really make such a big difference. We have been in a lockdown for now almost 1.5 years. Good thing about banking was right from the beginning, bank was declared essential service. So we were in office as well as we were at home. So, I mean, I choose where I want to work now. So really did make a difference for bankers. But I'm sure it must be quite stressful for some of the people who got stuck at home. So maybe I consider at the moment I'm a bit privileged than some of you.
All right. So I do this hot questions round on why I read segment. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. What's the first book you remember reading? It can be Sinhala, English, Tamil, anything. But what do you remember as the first book you read?
That's a tough question. I can't remember, to be honest.
Okay.
Probably maybe a management book, maybe Kotler, maybe, yeah. I'm sure I have read before that, but I can't remember now. Yeah.
So you've straight away gone into the strategy books, which is very, very interesting because those are what people extract for their practical experiences and work. In terms of aspiring personalities, was there someone you really looked up to or someone that really inspired you?
Well, I think when I really got serious about reading for knowledge and also, I mean, for inspiration, I think definitely Steve Jobs came on top of that list for some reason. And I consider him to be a man who changed the world and changed a generation of people. So then, other people like, I would say Nelson Mandela, who had another person who has, like, again, I think, he was a terrorist first, then he became a peacemaker, right? I mean, no one knows him as a terrorist, right? So I think I like him. Then obviously Bill Gates, and then this whole bunch of people who came to this generation and changed the world with technology. I think I admire them, and also I get inspired by them.
So what's the one thing that has made you proud so far?
Well, I think if you want to look at life in a bit of a philosophical manner, I always believe there's a entry point and exit point. I mean, even the life itself. You are born, you'll be dead one day. But having said that, I think your entry points and exit points could be slightly different in terms of what you want to do and what you are doing at the moment. I think I have few proud moments. I think launching first digital banking platform in Sri Lanka was one of those proud moments, being a Sri Lankan. Then, since you mentioned about Afghanistan, and also Afghanistan is pretty much in news almost every hour now. So I went to Afghanistan to set up a bank, and that was the very first bank that country had after many years. Probably before 70s they had, but I think for a current generation who look at the bank, the very first bank probably they may have seen is the Standard Chartered Bank, which we set up, but I'm not sure it exists now after the war ended and things like that. So I consider that to be a very proud moment, because when I went there, I can write a book about my journey to Afghanistan and how I spent few days, and how when I want to come back from Afghanistan, I couldn't make it because there were no flights flying every day. So that was a very interesting journey. So I'm very proud that I contribute to set up a bank in a country where no one wanted to go, and just after a war. Probably Sri Lankan can relate to that because we also had a war up north. So people who have not been to up north during the wartime of 30 years can probably relate to what I'm talking about.
And so it's congratulations for initiating those little setup. We're really proud to have citizens of Sri Lanka to take those initiatives. But if I ask you the risk you've taken, and what would that be?
I think it was a huge risk. In fact, I went supposedly after the war ended. Sort of, we can call it peace has begun in Afghanistan. But when I was supposed to fly from Dubai to Afghanistan, I used to live in Dubai at the time. So it was pretty cool that I can go to Afghanistan next morning. I'm taking a flight. But when I was in the airport, there was a news that there was an explosion in Kabul airport. That is when I'm going to land in a few hours, right? So everyone called me and said, "Hey, I think you should not go." So I'm a Sri Lankan, right? We were used to bombs and things like that in Sri Lanka, being Sri Lankan. So I didn't take it that seriously. Anyway, I always knew that after explosion, the peace come back, and there will be tight security and so on. So that way, I made my own personal assessment. Thought I should go. So I went ahead with the trip.
And I hope it was successful.
It was. I mean, ultimately, we set up a bank, and for people of Afghanistan who did not know about banking. So if I take 30 seconds explain what banking was all about in Afghanistan. So obviously, I spoke English. They spoke Farsi. So there was an interpreter who was doing the translation for me. So this guy who I met was a medical student at the time. So he knew English. He knows his mother tongue also. So I said, we are going to install an ATM. I'm sure we all know what ATM is all about, but he didn't get it. So I tried explaining a few times, but it didn't get. Then I said, look, ATM is like, a safe. You put money and lock it. He said, yes, I understand. Do you know TV? He said, yes, I understand. Okay. There's a TV on top of the safe. You can press a button on the TV, and there are a few things. It will tell you what to do, what not to do. Press a button, then the safe get open and money comes out. So I said, that's how the ATM works. Then he got it.
Wow. So it's like, I don't want to go back to how many years that was, but it's interesting to see how the communication or the language transition and how much you have taken that initial step. On my last question in the hot round, what would be your current goals, if I ask you that?
Well, I work for a bank and I lead a bank. And SD Bank is pretty much predominantly concentrating on the SME sector, the rural sectors, and women empowerment, so on. So I want to create a legacy of the areas we are focusing on And also, I think from an economics point of view, 52% of GDP of Sri Lanka comes from SME and MSMEs. So if we can contribute more and create much more opportunity for SMEs, I think this country can grow substantially. And also, I'm a major fan of technology and the digital. And a few years back, McKinsey did a study, and they said, just by converting few other things what you're doing to digital, your GDP can increase about 3 to 4%. That's about $3 or $4 billion. I'm talking about before COVID. Okay, probably after COVID it may have been more. So I think these two aspects, if I can create much impact during my entry and exit point of SPP, I think I would be happy. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start with our session on why I read. And when we had our pre-briefing session, Mr. Piyadigama mentioned that it's not, how do I say? So we have different types of people who are constantly reading books. They love it. Then there are people who actually follow research, that they want to read online details just to be updated. And that's one type of guest that we have. And then there are type that doesn't read anything. And that's the audience that we want to tap in, because reading a book actually brings that knowledge. And we're super excited to find out with Mr. Piyadigama the kind of online reading, what sort of perceived him to go on to it. But I'm going to start with his little childhood. So were you always, it's so interesting to find out that you've been reading Kotler's books, but were you always this book reading person? How does it happen when it comes to a library? How that transition of doing online research, how did that come about?
Well, I think if you look at my childhood, I don't think I was really enthusiastic in reading. And I mean, all the way up to maybe my uni, I was a bit on the lazy side of reading, but I read it because I had to read. Okay, that's why I remember Cotland, Michael Porter, and so on, right? So it's more like I do somewhat bare minimum, try to get the maximum out of what I'm doing. So that way I didn't spend too much time on reading. But when I started reading for knowledge and also to know about things, I think got really interested. So then I started buying books. By then, I was employed. I was resourceful enough to buy books whenever I feel like. Sometimes I go and buy 5 books, right? So this is probably 15 years ago. But then I realized also my life also got changed. I was relocating from one place to the other very often. So having these bulky books didn't help me. I couldn't carry them. So I got used to online reading, and the technology is made available now. So if you go to Amazon, you can buy the hard copy, so you can buy the soft copy. So I opted to soft copies. Then it's available on all my devices. I have few devices. Whenever I want to go to any place, I can read. So I think it became more convenient. It does not require any physical effort. So you achieve the same thing with in a different way, but it's much more easier.
So if I ask you the burning question, your favorite book, what is it?
Well, it's again, I think it's a very subjective. Sometimes, the context in which I read that book maybe helped me to believe that is great. Now, when I read about Steve Jobs' life and, this whole, the iPhone creation, the whole works, I think I was thoroughly inspired. Then when I lived in Singapore, when I started feeling what Singapore is all about rather than the stories we have heard, I got very interested to find out what really Lee Kuan Yew did. Then I went and bought this book. It's very thick. It's there are 2 volumes of this. So I was not going to read everything, but I got so interested, I started reading. So then it became my favorite book. I think today I would say it still has, I think, a place in my heart for this book, because it was a lifetime learning and a journey of a country with no resources and walking from less than third world to the first world, right? I think that happened during our lifetime, at least my lifetime, within a period of 30 to 40 years. So obviously, no nation in the world so far had got to that level within such a short period. So I mean, I admire Lee Kuan Yew and his governance and his even arrogance, right? Because you couldn't do a better job than anyone else or lived on this planet within a shorter period of time. So if you look at the greatest nations, everyone think the United States of America. They also say that. I'm not going to argue about it. But their life, if you look at, they started the United States origin is 1820, if I remember right, and about 220 years, right? Then the other nations who had power was nothing but colonial masters like the Britain. But this guy, Lee Kuan Yew, from nothing, right? He had only a flat land. When it rains, it gets flooded. I mean, if you go back and Google Singapore's pictures before Lee Kuan Yew, you can see this. He walked from nowhere to the first world. So I think it's a miracle. And of course, miracles can't just happen just because you are lucky. And they have really put hard work and very planned work. And also they brought, people who can do the job. And, I think quite ironical, some of those people were from Sri Lanka. So I always, when you look at Sri Lanka and Singapore, I mean, on one side I'm crying because Sri Lanka couldn't make it yet. And but Singapore had made it, and they are enjoying now. So obviously, I would consider Lee Kuan Yew's book From Third World to First World as one of the best I have read from knowledge point of view, from inspirational point of view, and something to even tell someone, look, someone has done it, we also can do it, So I think that's my favorite book.
I have been on mute. And so we have noticed a lot of CEOs extract the details of the book and they apply to real cases in Sri Lanka context or maybe overseas. Was there what was the speciality from this book that you sort of applied? You don't have to tell us all the secrets, but for example, how do you see it growing?
Well, I think obviously the Lee Kuan Yew story was about the country, not about a company. But he ran the company like he ran the country like a company. In fact, don't laugh at what I'm saying. The ministers of cabinet of Singapore get bonus paid for their performance. If the GDP goes up, finance ministers get a bonus. So they basically ran more like a performance-driven culture and like a private company. So to that extent, you can relate to it. I think some of the things, not that I learned, I confirm my own thinking about things. Like, for an example, he talk about promote people based on merit, okay? And, don't give too much of attention to, ethnicity and things like that. Basically, he says we are all the same. In fact, Singapore is a very funny country. The founder of Singapore is a British guy called Raffles. There's a Raffles Hotel, Raffles Place and all that in Singapore, right? Raffles. He set up Singapore because Singapore didn't exist on the world map during the, maybe I think 200 years ago. Sri Lanka existed for 2,500 years, we know that, right? We were Thambapani, we were this and we were that and all that, right? Singapore didn't exist. So this British guy came and founded that, but it was full of Malays, originally the people who were living. Then came Chinese because they were migrants to work in Singapore. So if you look at Singapore today, majority as Chinese, then the Malays, then the Indians, more of Tamils. So their national anthem is sung in Malay. The Chinese are singing the national anthem is sung, Malay. So it's a bit of a pickle, right? But it coexists pretty well. So anyway, Lee Kuan Yew said, look, I can make this work. And the book says, I learned this from Sri Lanka. He has seen or heard the trouble Sri Lanka had back in 1950. There was a sort of ethnic conflict, okay? There were riots. And Sri Lanka had every 5 years, 10 years, some sort of this. So he said, I ensure we don't repeat the mistake Sri Lanka made. So that's one of the learning for Singapore, which probably still we are learning. Okay. So that's one thing. So coming back to your question, so I do the same thing, even if I have to recruit people, I don't worry about whether he came from so-called good school or bad school, whether he went to the university or not. As long as he has the skill, the attitude, and the passion, I will go for him. So Lee Kuan Yew did the same thing. Then he spoke about most of the time about the honesty and integrity of positions you hold. I always put a lot of pressure on me because I feel my position is very religious, and what I do and what I don't do reflect on people who work for me down the line. So I take a lot of responsibility on that, and also I know that also impact my shareholders because I'm working for public quoted company. So then I respect the regulators and so on. It's the same thing what Lee Kuan Yew said, look, you can't be not honest when you hold public offices, right? And in book, once he says one of his best friend got arrested for taking bribe. So this guy comes to him and say, look, you have to save my life. I'll be in jail for a long time, or I'll have to commit suicide. So we can't answer, take the second option. Okay, but it just imagine this happened in Sri Lanka. I don't have to explain that. Okay, so I think so. The lot of things that he said in this book we apply, or I confirm my own way of doing through this learning. So I think that's fundamentally how I sort of get either inspired or learn out of this.
Interesting, sir. And you gave some very valuable insights on how employee management is one of the key factors which I wish most organizations follow, like appreciating people and finding their real trait or good qualities as to what they can offer. And if they have to improve, it's their soft skills or learning ability. If an organization can identify, you can push that person to drive and achieve that. And I believe through the book Third World to First has really brought up a story, and that's why you mentioned as to why you started off with this book. But you actually read a physical book, and that is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. What made you buy this book, read this book? Did somebody tell you? What was the thinking behind?
Well, I think probably I read during my MBA time, because MBA had some assignment, but they didn't specifically say about this book. So they more of, I think, if I remember right, we were asked to do a book review. So of a book, how it can, relate to the, your working life and kind of thing. So we picked up this book. So then I really got interested because, it had some serious stuff. So I think probably I would say, since you asked this question, how did I get interested in reading? Probably this influenced me. This book influenced me because I felt there were a lot have been written, particularly the Western world. Because in the Eastern world, we don't write. Sri Lankans don't write. But Western world, they become very open and write. Some may be a bit of exaggeration, but there's a lot to learn from them. There. So I got interested in reading 7 Habits, particularly because of one thing was it was an assignment, but it really fueled my reading.
So what were the key takes from the book? What are the 7 habits that you thought, I should take this, I should drop this out?
Well, I think if you talk about 7 habits, he's, talk about, if I may just quickly read, he says, be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first thing first, that basically prioritizing, think win-win, that means collaborate, seek first to understand, then to be understood, that means, you have to know how to play the game in a team and things like that. Synergize, again, I think put right people at the right place and, get the job done and so on. Then sharpen the saw. Actually, this last one, the sharpen saw, I tell my people slightly different. I say unlearn and learn. Because, things what we learned 30, 40 years ago has no relevance now. The engineering I learned has no relevance because they're all outdated now. So you have to sharpen the saw all the time. So I think this became more of a lifestyle thing for me, because I mean, not that I've strictly learned from this book, but I go back to what I said, a certain thing that I knew about, I confirmed myself. And was there a certain thing that I did not know so well, I refined myself through this reading. So I think that's the beauty of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the outcomes of it,
So with your work experience, you worked with a number of banks. Now we don't want to necessarily discuss about the cultures, because different banks have different target audience and their cultures are somewhat. But there would have been a learning curve from all of this with the types of people that you worked. What's the most unforgettable, the point where you thought, this is it, this is what it is?
Well, to be honest, I don't think I had that difficulty. Probably maybe I also had my own skills and the talents, and maybe as a person I was comfortable with people. So I never came across working with people as a challenge. And I actually greatly admire, and I like to praise my former employer Standard Chartered for giving me the opportunity to work with in a multinational organization. We had 80 different nationalities, right? So probably I'm sure I have worked at least 50 of those nationalities. So it's sometimes a bit funny, and so you go and land in, say, Africa. I mean, when I was based in London, I had a job in Africa, so I traveled. So I land in, say, Kenya or Ghana. So I have met these people over the phone, spoken to them, and I mean, we had some kind of video capability at that time, but the phone was the instrument we used most of the time. So you land there, and now you speak to this guy who you have spoken a few times over the phone, and have a chit chat. After about half hour chit chat is over. Now you get back to work. So we had to work with people within a short period, whether you knew or not. So that way, there's nothing called, you had a honeymoon to, know about the cultures and things like that. But having said that, you mentioned that I have been to management development program in to NCR and London schools and so on.
Yeah.
Actually, there were professors who had done research about cultural behaviors and, how to work with different cultures and so on. I mean, they taught us as well. So I think a lot of credit goes to my life at Standard Chartered. I was there for 18 years. So I admire that.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing those insights, and very open, honestly, you're saying how things worked out really well for you. You are a true innovator, and you have launched so many different areas or platforms for people to move on to, which people are actually benefiting a lot. Was it through a lot of online research, or what kind of moved you to the point that we should get into online platforms of introducing stuff to people?
Well, I think my online reading also, I think learning of the application of technology. So let me tell you this. I think if you go back to millions of or billions of years of human existence, so we still are the same humans, except our brain is now better trained to do bigger things, better things. We are the same humans. So the capacity to do something bigger, better still has not improved. But I think what we have done is we have brought technology, or we have developed technology which can do job better, faster, and we have, as a result, the totality, human plus technology, has become more effective or more efficient. So the humans still remain same. We are still more like our growth is a straight line, but technology growth is exponential. Now you take for an example the taxi companies operating in Sri Lanka, the Pygmies and the Ubers, right? I mean, they can just scale the platform to the whole of Sri Lanka, whole of world within no time. Look at Facebook. It's connected with now 5 or 6 billion people of 7 billion population in the world. But if you were to connect this physically, you couldn't. So the technology is the game changer, the difference we have brought into this world. So with that belief, I always, believe you apply technology and you have to innovate, not necessarily sometimes technology, but mostly the technology is what helps you to innovate something. So as a firm believer, and also I think I have read about it, and I have read success stories about. I've read about stories that has not really made a success, like there are failures. So I have read both sides, and I have figured out my own sort of approach, the strategy to do that. So I think so that's what I'm talking about now. And also technology cannot be applied just because it works in one country but might not be the other country. There are we say use cases, like you have to find your use cases, or you have to find you are going to resolve a problem. Okay, that problem probably might not even exist. For example, if you take digital photography, when Kodak invented the digital camera back in the 1970s, they thought this is not going to be a hit. But without their knowledge, everyone else did it. They didn't do it. Eventually, Kodak went to bankruptcy. That's a very interesting story. So anyway, getting back to my point, I see a lot of opportunity of Sri Lanka's growth by applying technology and digital technologies. Right now, if I take very simple thing, digital banking, for an example, can do without touching cash, notes or coins. So if I say this number to you, Sri Lanka's cash in circulation, basically it's in your pocket or it's in your handbag. Okay, it's the value is 968 billion rupees. It's almost $1 trillion rupees is in our with us. It does not produce any economic value because it's idling cash, right? But just imagine half of that go to digital, right? What does it mean? So this money will stay in the banking system. So when there's money in the banking system, what do we do as bankers? We actually generate credit. We give loans. Okay, we can give more loans because always loans are actually coming from deposits. Okay, so I go back to my SME story. Okay, you digitalize Sri Lanka, you have no money in the bank, so you can give more loans to SMEs. Even if say 10% fail, still banks will make money, and we can protect depositors and shareholders' wealth by even taking slightly more risk. So application of digital and technologies has a huge economic benefit in a country like Sri Lanka. In fact, if you go back to Singapore, even Dubai, I think why they are so successful, they adapted technology pretty early. So with that in mind, I think bringing technology to banking is, I think, a no-brainer. You got to do it.
So thank you for bringing us those interesting case studies and stories for us. You're keeping on inspiring us on the way of thinking and also looking at different abilities as well. I'm going to move on to the next book that you read. And it seems like a lot of the contents or the interest of area that you have been looking at is one on effective people, understanding the type of people, and also how we move and improve our lifestyles, or in cultures, in worlds, how do we develop ourselves. And one of the interesting books that you are currently or have read is The Ride of a Lifetime. Tell me why that book?
Okay. One thing, when you look at that book, the guy who wrote this book was a guy called Robert Iger, or maybe Iger. So Robert was actually have been around with Disney for a long time, right? And when he was thinking of becoming the CEO, his chances were virtually maybe 1%, 2%. Like no one thought he would or he should. So, but he had this desire to be, because he come from a difficult background. Okay, and he actually talks about his father and mother and how difficult their lives have been, low middle class income family, and so anyway, his father had taught him, look, if you want to be successful in American terms, you had to be in business, you had to be an executive of a company. So he had this desire, and so somehow he worked through the system and worked with the system. So ultimately he ended up as a CEO. Then he was there for 15 years. So the book is about him more like writing this book at the time of his retirement after being the CEO. So he, I think, gives very interesting stories about obviously his childhood, and that has driven him to be someone successful. He knows that when you're economically successful, that most problems go away from you. But of course, you have new sets of problems to deal with. You have too much of money now. Okay, so that's a different thing. And again, he also talks about merit-based organizations. Then sometimes trusting your guts more than your strategic approach. And he criticized one of the unit they had called strategic planning unit or strat planning unit in Disney, because they become more of paper pushing rather than really not on the ground. They don't understand. Then also he also talked about a lot of mergers and acquisitions he has done, and with different personalities. In fact, he bought a company called Pixar from Apple. So it was how difficult it was to work with Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs is known to be a tough nut. Okay, but how he got around Steve Jobs and ultimately ending up as a good friend of him up until Steve's death. And then he talks about this is about more of a media company. The media is very artistic, and they are different people. They are not really sometimes the usual business executive we are used to. So how he worked with such talented people, but who are not really the business people, and his story about how he worked through them. Then also, most American companies expand their businesses to the rest of the world. I think it has happened during his time, I think, big time. And he talks about operations in the Middle East and India and the UK and so on. So that is more of how to reach global audience. Then your question of previously, how do you work with different cultures? And in fact, the book started with a story of he's in China to open their theme park. So he talks about how to deal with Chinese and Chinese hierarchies, and that Secretary General, this Secretary General, the mayors, and so they are very the protocol matters a lot in China. So he talks about all that. So anyway, again, I think this book gives me a lot of inspiration about I work with a lot of gut feeling. Okay, And sometimes I start with my gut and then I go to research to find out whether my gut is correct or not. So not the other way around, most of the time. So he also says the same thing. In fact, he says, even if all the numbers are right through a strategic planning process, if you feel it's not right, it's not right. In fact, he has nicely summarized some of those maybe 20 odd points at the other book, more like used as a Bible in business world. Yeah, it was a very interesting. I mean, I read very recently, but the book is actually not that new, probably not that old. I think it's recently concluded because I can see the book talks about even President Trump. That was a year ago, right? So
Yeah.
maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it's relatively new. I think I enjoy reading that. In fact, my daughter had the physical book, but I didn't want to read the physical. I went online and bought. It's pretty cheap, cheaper than the hard copy. So I read it. In fact, I was able to read even my private places when I found time. So that's the beauty of reading online.
No, I thought it's normally the other way around. Generally, the younger generation will get into online, but it's so interesting to see that your daughter was reading the paperback and you're reading the online version of it. You brought in an interesting point saying working with different people and also how Steve Jobs was a little bit of a tough person in the way he handles. And I think it's obvious that's why his brand is doing so well. But how do you handle difficult people? What's your strategies? If it's a secret, I won't bug you for it, but how do you handle tough people? Because here in Sri Lanka, it's very difficult to convince someone that this is what we're bringing.
Well, I think one become tougher or whatever you want to call it. I think my approach is you have to be more than 100% honest about what you want to do and how you want to do it, right? You don't have to deviate from that position. So sometimes it can be bad news for the other person, okay? But you have to have the guts to be, honest, and you have to maintain a high level of integrity of what you're doing. And also you should not have any hidden bias. For me, it has worked most of the time. I would say good 95% it has worked for me. 5% I have got into trouble being too honest about things. Like, I can, call a spade a spade. I think sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes he or she may be my superior, but I have to say you're a waste of space. Okay. So that doesn't go well either. But I would say honest world, in fact, all these books, what I read, there is a large amount of chapters spent on the honesty and integrity of leadership or leaders, right? And to me, I think that is the basic of anything. But some leaders are not, because they become insecure. Sometimes they do all crazy things. I don't have that feeling. I in fact, I'm very proud to say people who have worked for me, at least 4 people currently holding CEO positions. So, which I consider to be an honor. You can't have that kind of thing. That's because I have told them honestly. I have told them honestly, saying you're a waste of time on and off, right? And I have basically brought them down to the even.
How did they take it? Did they take it well?
Well, one of the guys who is CEO now. So when I met him for the first time, my first few weeks, so I told him, look, I think you are holding this position because you knew a boss pretty well. Okay. That really didn't go very well. He said, are you saying that I'm holding this position because I knew the boss? I said, major part is yes, but having said that, you also have skills to do it. So that we don't take it as a sort of complete miss. Okay.
Yeah.
But I told him why I said that. Okay. So now after maybe 4 or 5 years, we knew each other. So he ended up as a CEO of another company, which I'm very proud of himself. So he comes and tells me now, look, I think what you said had a learning for me. So I became more human, and I had a lot of humility out of that exercise. So I became a better person. So I think going back to your question, I think honesty, number one. Number two, it has to be a merit-based organization. You have to have people who are doing a better job than the others. I think should be holding leadership, provided they have leadership qualities. But sometimes you can be brilliant in one thing, particularly in areas like engineering, areas like arts. You can, but you might not have necessarily people management skills, and so that also you have to detect pretty early. You should not give them a responsibility which you can't handle and have a crash landing. So if you follow those basic things, I think you can grow organization, I think, from nothing to about 10-15%. Then you really have to go to the next level of technicalities like strategic planning and understanding research and very sophisticated stuff. But I think sometimes you don't need all this sophistication, at least for the next few years. Get those basics right. You're doing a lot.
Thank you for those very valuable thoughts. You brought in a lot of inspiration during a weekend, and also how to work with different personalities and different cultures. But if I ask you your favorite country to work, which one?
Okay, work-wise, I would say I will put Singapore on top of the list. And in fact, the work what I I work in a number of places. So I was based in Dubai. So when I land in Dubai to start my work, I think it was Dubai's development phase. And there's a road called Sheikh Zayed Road. That's the highway to Dubai to Abu Dhabi. So when I landed there was only one tall building. And I left after 5 or 6 years. So there were high rises on both sides of the road, all the way to about maybe 30 kilometers. That's Jebel Ali, beyond Dubai Intercity and so on. So that was the type of development they had. Okay, so but then I went to London. That was already a developed nation. But when I was based in these places, I have been to the Middle Eastern countries. Like you go to Lebanon, Jordan, all these places, different places at different level of development. But Dubai was one of the best places. But I felt it was not really authentic because the locals are not really seen and heard in public because of their culture. So it was more of Indian, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, and the whites to be seen and your friends. It didn't. So London is a more of a established cosmopolitan place, so it has its own good. But it has everything in life what you want to experience. It had from one extreme to the other. But from everything put together, Singapore is one of the best places they have created and sustained and maintained for a long time. And it's so much so that it is their culture. So they will never cross the road unless you find a crossing. It's so intuitive to them. So I think they have done a good job. So work-wise, I would say Singapore.
I think you brought some very valuable points which can instill in a lot of Sri Lankans, I suppose, in their work front, etc. We'd like to open questions from the audience, and you can send in your questions in the Q&A section. That's how simple it is. We're going to continue till 7:30, so you can be a part of today's event. Thank you for all our viewers for staying with us right to the end. Mr. Piyadigama, I want to ask, why stop engineering and get into banking? What was the reason or the transition there?
That was a major accident. It was never a very well thought decision. It was an accident. So I used to work for John Keys. They had a technology arm. I mean, I used to be the head of engineering at the time. So Stan Chartwell used to be one of my customers. So one time they called me and said, we want you to join us. I said, nonsense, I'm not a banker. I'm just a techie. Why are you asking me? But then they gave me a list of things they said, they have seen in me because I work with them. So it ended up with joining Stan Chart, but of course, they had to pay a cost to that. So my salary went up by 100%. Right. So obviously I couldn't say no to it. So that's how I began. So when I went there to run technology, my background is technology. But then the Stan Chart Bank bosses thought, this guy is better than technology, give him something else. So they gave me banking. So that had a totally different journey of banking. Any banking is not rocket science, by the way. So it was pretty easy, but we packaged differently to show that we are important. Okay. So in the end, I found that to be a very easy thing to do. So that's how I became a banker. But still, my thinking process made me very engineering. Engineering is very interesting field. We don't design and build anything to fail. I think if you want to get inspired, you should go and watch that YouTube video of how we landed this. What is it called? I forget the name of the rover. So in March, the Americans landed a lab there, right? It's called Perseverance, right? So if you look at the engineering they use, because you have never done any testing of landing in Mars And so engineering has to be so world class, it'll never fail. So it's basically engineered to not fail. So it's a good thinking even in banking, because banks are by nature, we are a risk taking business. We take depositors' money and shareholders' money and give it to someone else, call a loan. And if he doesn't pay, we are all in trouble. So you have to know how to take risk and how to mitigate risk. So engineering thinking actually can really help banking. So it's useful.
And I think it's a collaborative effort, because learning not just about engineering, it has a blend and balance on how we can grow as an organization as well.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions coming from our audience. Guest one says, can you please tell us one book which we must read? What would that be, Mr. Piyadigama?
Sorry, say it again, please.
Tell us one book which we must read.
Well, I think out of the books what I have read, I think. By the way, I also want to sort of give you another advice when you start reading books. Most of the books I have read, I read when I was an adult. Okay, I sometimes knew things as well as when I read, I get it. Now, when I read the Disney guy's book about mergers and acquisitions, I myself had done it. So that way, I can get it. So that way, I can extract value out of that. But if you have never done M&A, but if you have heard or if you have learned, your value out of that reading may not be that great. So that way, I think the point is you have to read things which are relevant to you and also has an immediate value. I mean, that's the way I would look at. But I think the Lee Kuan book has, I think, a lot of learning particularly for Sri Lankans. In fact, he talks about Sri Lanka most of the time as his place where he has learned. And in fact, he talks about the clean city of Colombo, because at that time, the Singapore is a dirty city. Okay, and it's worse than some of the places we call Korea and things like that. So he always say that. And in fact, in one place he says, "I want to make Singapore like Colombo." Right. So I would ask for you all to read Lee Kuan Yew's book of Third World to First World. You can make a lot of relevance out of it, and also a lot of learning, and also particularly if you are young, I would say 20s and 30s and so on. You have longer life than me, so probably you can contribute to Sri Lanka's development, and this can be actually a book to learn how to do nation building. It covers everything what Sri Lankans need.
So I'm going to ask you a very burning question. Can we get out of this economic situation that we're in?
You can. I think first of all, you have to tell the truth and say, look, what is our real problem, right? I mean, I know part of the real problem because I associate the problem. It's very simple. See, if you are earning 100 rupees, you can't spend 120 rupees. Okay, so only way you can do that, you got 100 rupees, then you can borrow another 20 and you're okay now. You spend 120 rupees. But the next time when you come, still you are going to spend 120, but at the same time you have to pay that 20 also back to the place where you borrow that money from, right? So now your 120 become 125. So you do this for a few years, you're bankrupt. Okay. So first you have to stop doing that. Okay. That's very simple. You have to stop doing that. Then I bring this lesson which I was talking about, I think, many times about honesty and integrity. Okay. I mean, it's unfortunate that we elect people who are not honest and with integrity. So we should be blamed for that. Maybe I think for a change, maybe we also have to go and do part of that in whatever the way. Say sometimes you don't have to be politics to contribute to Sri Lanka's economy. I mean, I know I do that. Right, I do that as a banker. I'm helping all rural population. So on and off, one might say that you're making money out of it. Yes, I'm making money out of it, but that is not a crime. Okay, I have helped someone, and I have also brought someone up's life. In the process, I made some money because this money does not belong to me; it belongs to shareholders and depositors. So that's okay. Don't worry about banks making money. So the point is, we have to go and occupy leadership positions where we can create an impact. If you do that, those very simple few things, I think we can get out of the immediate problem. Then if you want to do development, like, Lee Kuan Yew says, look, one of the strategy what I applied. So at the time, 1960s, early 70s, he brought manufacturing from the Western countries to Asia. So that Asia happened to be Singapore in most cases. Singapore's economy, if you look at and understand, they get major part of their GDP's from exports. But Singapore is much smaller country than Sri Lanka, but they have set it up nicely. They have given the freedom to do business. In fact, on the business index, they come on top always. So they have enabled the environment. So we also should do the same thing if you want to bring FDI. In fact, I was listening to a similar lecture yesterday. So most people think that we have to give tax concessions to bring FDIs. In fact, that was the seventh out of a list of various other things. Number one was easy to do business. Number two, more like political stability and things like that. Number three, labor. Number four, this whole bureaucracy and things like that. So I think Sri Lanka can change within few hours if you really put your heart and mind onto those little things.
And a proper plan in place for us to execute that kind of idea that we have, and also where people can also contribute as a part of its area. So you have a question. When will we have more Lanka QR merchants in Sri Lanka than the normal POS merchants? Is the question brought to you.
Okay, if I give you the number, you will be surprised. So Sri Lanka has taken 30 years to establish POS machines of about 9,000 Sri Lanka. So that's the POS machines where you put your card in and do transfer. 30 years, 9,000. But if you go to Cargill or Kings, you will see about 5-10 machines in the same shop. That means merchant-wise, probably you have about 40-50,000. But Lanka QR has been around for a while from 2018 when Central Bank started, but we really got active in 2020. That was the time I became the chairman of this committee. So we really had a run on that. Now we have 250,000 Lanka QR merchants. Okay. Within 6 months, we got 200,000, right? So even a person who is selling Tamili or Kadala is a Lanka QR person now. But again, I will take the critic also. So what happened was we went and gave a Lanka QR, display to say a person who's selling family. But most of the period, last many months, have been a lockdown period. So family person has forgotten his Lanka QR signboard. And also the users also have forgotten because, there's no consistency. So we lost the momentum. But we also going to come up with a very interesting campaign with iconic brand ambassadors Sri Lanka can have. Very soon we are come out with that. Just to popularize Lanka QR and to create awareness. In fact, we were doing Lanka QR awareness event every month in every major cities. We did one in 2 in Colombo, Kandy, we did in Gaul, Mathura, then we were to go to Gampa, then lockdown came and hit us. So, but I think what I like to say is we have done a lot of work. The usage has also gone up, but I have not still gone to 500 billion. I have crossed about 2 billion, put all the banks together. So it's happening, but I think progress has been slightly slow and got impacted because of the COVID situation. So, but we are not going to give up. We are going to come very strong on this.
And so one of the final questions, we like to invite our audience that we have a few more minutes that you can send in your questions in the Q&A section. Videography, photography, a passion, how do you balance this entire process? Because it seems like, so you're doing a lot of research and it's a lot of balancing with so much of areas of industries or work that you're involved in. But how do you make time for passion?
Well, I think I'm very efficient in my thinking and executing. Like I sometimes think about now, I do it now, right? I think people who work for me consider me to be very unpredictable, and but they know this is coming somewhere. So I think it's my mindset. So if I want to read a book now, I'll stop everything and read the book. So I prioritize. But if you go to the 7 habits again, I think these are there. They say like prioritize, like first thing first kind of thing. If I feel I want to read a book, I'll read the book. But if I do photography, I'll do that, right? And so like that. So by having habits like that, I think helps me to do something what I enjoy doing. And sometimes I travel and take photography. I send you a video. I don't know that you found that to be available.
Yes. We'll be playing that very soon.
All right. Okay. So you will see photography of my work, and this is some. And also, if you go to my Facebook, you will see my timeline maybe full of photography That is prior to I became CEO of SDB Bank, but after that, I think my photography has sort of gone on. But I do photography, but I don't post many now because I don't want to bore people with too many postings. So I do what is more important.
Okay,
so,
sir.
but still, I have a serious interest in photography and videography, and I like travel and so on.
So we've come to the end of today's session on our segment, Why I Read. What would you like to leave for our viewers?
Well, I think if you look back, humanity, the humans have become bigger and better and taller than they were because of the knowledge they have gathered. So gathering knowledge, one is so you go to the university or college and you learn, right? But then the rest is more for your reading, okay? Because I can remember my personal experience when I did engineering, the memory chips and the semiconductors we are talking about, it existed, but at very early stage. So we used to have transistors. So transistor is what probably you may have heard this word transistor. There were transistor radios, but now transistors do not exist now. So this has happened during my lifetime, right? So things change so fast. Okay, you got to keep reading, you got to keep learning, and you got to keep unlearning, and that's how you can advance yourself as a person. That's how you can actually contribute to the society or the country or the organization where you work. Otherwise, you become a irrelevant person. So your relevance, your contribution can be only by learning. Learning of nothing but reading. So it can be online reading, it can be executive summary reading, whatever you do, apart from the experience you gain from them. So I would encourage everyone to read as much as you can, and that I think will help for you to grow and also for your country to grow as well. That's my final thoughts.
Although I thought it's a final thoughts, we've got a few questions now coming up from the audience. Probably I'll take this one. How can we become tech savvy if we have very low knowledge on it?
Well, don't underestimate Sri Lanka. Okay. I don't know whether you have seen one of the tech things happened to Sri Lanka was the mobile phones. So I remember I used to have a mobile phone of that, brick size one. I was born to that generation, and I was like very high profile to carry a phone like that. So there are a lot of pride in carrying that phone at the time. Huh? It's like having a private jet now. So, but today everyone in Sri Lanka has a phone. In fact, we have 31 million phone connections. Okay, and for 21 million population. So the point what I make is the tech savviness is actually it depends on how you
Embrace
make
it.
that. I think how you make out of when you say tech savvy. Say technology has to be brought to people where the technology usage should be as simple as idiot proof. Any person can be able to use anything when it is made so user friendly. So the mobile phone, anyone can use it now, right? No one trained you how to use a mobile phone, right? So similarly, now we have our digital banking apps. So we put a lot of effort to make it user friendly. We have this subject called UI, UX, user interface, user experience, and design thinking, and all this psychological thing we bring in. Even we pay a lot of attention where to put this button, okay, of our app. So with that, you don't have to be a tech savvy person use technology. It's up to the people who are providing technology to make it not so complicated. I mean, that is what the story of Steve Jobs and his thinking, if you really look at, but that's what he did. He made it so easy and he made it so available, right? So that's what we should do. So if I give a bit of numbers to this, Sri Lanka's the digital literacy is 50% at the moment. So which is quite interestingly very high. Our literacy is 92%, right? So when you have 50% of people know how to use a mobile phone and do a few things, which is quite a high number. So, then the next phase of learning will not take 5 years, it will be 5 months. That's why learning technology is more exponential. It's not a straight line. Only 5 people will learn every year. No. The first 5 years maybe took 1 year, but next 10, 100 will take only a few months. So that way, we can fast track this whole technology deployment and making everyone so-called tech savvy.
Brilliant answer, sir. And I think how the transition of us coming to you live on Zoom, getting adapted to moving into online lifestyle, that has completely changed. We never ever imagined for a lifestyle of staying at home and working in front of a screen. There's
Yeah.
good, there's bad. There is a lot of positives that has brought in, and there is a lot of time where we can adjust ourselves into things that we can prioritize and work on. Mr. Thilak Piyadigama, it's been really amazing to hear from you and also to learn some great insights, especially on online reading. The fact that apart from other guests that we've had on this segment, we found it very inspiring in terms of learning different case studies and how you brought the Why I Read segment to a different level. So on behalf of the team, we'd like to say a very big thank you for being with us, and also to all our viewers who have joined us here today. Thank you for your questions and for your patience and time. Please do stay with us online, because we're going to take you through a fantastic video now of the passion and drive of his video skills. And this is what Mr. Piyadigama has to offer for you. Take care, stay safe, watch the video.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that video. Have yourself a wonderful Saturday. Until we see you next time on Pick a Book, stay safe.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Sharon. It was lovely. The session was great. Everything went lovely. Thank you for cooperating with us. And see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
All right, see you. Bye.
Bye.